Hello, I am Marcus and one of the co-creators of Fathom, and for this week's video I'll be going over dice pools and checks and contests. The first topic for today are dice pools and what they mean in Fathom. Fathom uses a d6 based system. You will only ever need to use 6-sided dice in order to determine the results of any roll. In comparison to D&D, your dice pool of d6s are effectively your d20. You will be using your dice pools for almost everything. The more dice in your dice pool goes, the better. Figuring out the amount of dice in your dice pool is as simple as looking at your statistic and skill. Let me pull up the thug stats sheet. Take a look at the thug here. To determine their dice pool for force, let's add their strength statistic, the 5 over here, to their force skill, which is 3. 5 plus 3 is 8, so they'll have a dice pool of 8 when it comes to doing force check/contests. Now, let's determine what the result of rolling is, now that you've learned what your dice pool actually is composed of. Namely, Fathom's system works by a 4-up. Every 4, 5, and 6 count as a success, and your total number of successes are the combined amount of 4, 5s, and 6s. Let's say the thug rolls their force and wants to determine their results. Let's say, for this example, he rolled a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 4, a 5, and a 6. Relatively average roll. Looking at the result, we can determine that the thug got a total of 4 successes on their roll. Now that you know how to determine how to roll your dice, let's put this in context of checks and contests. Beginning with checks, a check is a roll made to beat or equal a specific value. This specific value will be called the difficulty check, or DC for short. Abilities that require a check will state the DC, or the GM can determine it when there is none given. Let's go back to the thug on the board. This thug here wants to open this door. The GM determines that this would be a DC 3 might check. Looking at his stats, it's pretty easy to tell where his 7 comes from. Once again, his 5 plus his 2, he should have 7 dice here. Alright, knowing that he has 7 dice, let's roll it real quick. Separating these, we can see that he got a total of 5 successes, so this means he succeeds on the check and is able to open the door. Now that you know how to do a check, let's reframe this context and this situation in the form of a contest instead. Let's move these rats in front of the door here, and the tunnel rats will attempt to prevent him from opening it. Because there are 2 creatures involved, this would instead be a contest, not a check. A contest is very similar to a check, except for 2 major differences. First, contests do not have a set number to beat. The DC is instead determined by what your opponent rolls. For this context, it's what the tunnel rat rolls in comparison to the thug. Second, you must surpass your opponent's number of successes. After all, if you were to match, nothing would realistically happen. Let's roll this check now that we know what we're doing. We know that the tunnel rats have a might of 3 since they have strength and a might of 0. So let's see who wins in this circumstance. We boosted a roll for both, but the thug beats the rat with a total of 6 successes over their 3, meaning the thug is able to open the door and enter this area. Now that we've learned what a check and contest is, let's move on to the most complicated form of a contest, attacks and defending. Attacks, put simply, are contests in which succeeding or losing deals damage or additional effects. However, when compared to normal contests, attacks have a lot more moving parts behind them that can change the results. I'll go through a single attack of the thug and break down each part as they come up. For this example, this thug here will use a broadblade to attack this rat. The thug is going to use their broadblade attack over here. It has the following characteristics of force, melee weapon, physical attack. Starting off with force. Force is the stat that you'll have to use in order to attack. So, as we know before, it should be 8 dice. Next, melee weapon are more categorization, and they are just used for the purposes of abilities when you have to be wielding one, or if you have to defend against one. Just for that, it's really just a categorization name. Now lastly is the physical attack one. Physical attack means that this attack must be contested with your vigor or evasion, these two stats. This represents your character either withstanding or dodging out of the way of the attack. Now lastly, the two more important facts is that the weapon has a modifier of -2v and a damage profile of 2 physical, namely the 2 here is the important part. Let's move on to the rat side of the attack, their defense choices. As stated previously, the rat must defend with either its vigor or evasion, because it is a physical attack. This is where the -2v modifier comes in. The weapon's modifiers in this circumstance are -2v, so that reduces the rat's dice pool here from 3 to 1. However, the rat has its own modifiers, over here, +1e. This means that the rat can naturally reduce the weapon's modifiers that target it by +1e. So this would only really matter if the weapon had any evasion penalties. However, unfortunately in this circumstance there were none. So this means that the tunnel rat will defend with its full 6 count dice if it chooses to defend with evasion. Looking at the rat stats, pretty obvious that we'll choose the evasion to defend with this time. So now that we have all the stakes set up, let's roll their dice and see if they hit and if damage goes through. This will be the thug's dice pool on the right, while the rat's dice pool will be on the left. For this example, the thug got 7 successes, while the rat only got 3. This means that the thug succeeded and the attack hits. Any effects that would occur on hit now would trigger. Now that we've figured out that we hit, let's try and determine damage. As previously stated, the damage profile of this attack was 2 physical. We subtract the number of defender successes from the attacker successes. So delete 3 on both sides. We're left with 4. As previously stated, the damage profile of the attack was 2. So we multiply this by 2. And we're left with 8 damage. This was a basic run through of how attacks might work, but there are multiple different types of attacks. Next time I'll go over all these minute differences and all the different types that you might see. I'll see you in the depths next time, Delvers.